Hi everyone, Video James here. Hope you all are having a good day. I decided to do some low effort video content because I recently went to the hospital. I'm fine. I just had low sodium. Um, but I'm kind of stuck in my house for a little bit, so I haven't been able to do much. And what better way to um, you know, pass the time than to upload a video onto my YouTube channel, Video James, which I haven't uploaded to in maybe half a year, if not longer. I don't remember. It's actually probably been since a year ago. I think that's the last time I uploaded to my YouTube channel. I've recorded some videos since then, but I've been trying to work out my video recording software, and it's been buggy as all hell, you know, and that can't be helped. These things happen. I'm just okay. I guess that little white bar at the bottom is just there. That just might be my fucking studio stuff. Anyway, um, my videos couldn't post them online for any reason whatsoever, and I really don't want to record from my phone again because every time I do that, I kill my battery or just some other crap happens that is just like super out of my control. And then it also takes ages to upload on YouTube. When I did my World Cup recordings, wow, that was like 2 years ago now. One of my main problems was that I was using a file type that just took ages to upload onto YouTube, and I just don't want to deal with that again. So, but yeah, there's my long-winded explanation for why I haven't been uploading in a while. And this is not going to be soccer content, so sorry to all my soccer viewers who expect me to talk about the Euros. I really don't want to talk about the Euros right now. I'll be honest, I'm kind of disinterested with the Euros as they currently stand. I mean, that can change, right? I just thought that the groups were a little bit way too stacked in most cases, and I'm very wrong on prediction content all the time, anyways. So, are you guys really interested in seeing my soccer content? I mean, a lot of you are here because of my soccer content, so you probably are, and I appreciate that. Thank you for subscribing, and I encourage you to subscribe if you enjoy my content. But my username's Video James. I really like video games. That's where the name comes from. It was my nickname from my older brother since I was a little kid. Um, and I play a lot of Dead by Daylight, and I just spent the last 4 hours playing the game because I had nothing else to do. And I just decided to do something low effort without recording my gameplay and forgetting that I have my capture on and all these other things. I want to record a video that's just talking about if the killers from Dead by Daylight were to get into a fight, how would they do, right? And, the way I'm going to measure this is through lots of different factors. I'm not going to do like a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 100 or anything like that. S tier, essentially means that the killer would be nigh unstoppable, if not totally unstoppable in a fight. I will be ranking individually as well. A tier means that they're very strong and very likely to win a fight, but they're not. They can get outpaced quite a bit by certain other killers. B tier is slightly better than middle of the road. They have a good chance at winning a fight, on a good day. C tier is they're unlikely to win an overall fight or battle royale or however you want to put it. But they have chances. They have people that they can beat. D tier is almost would never win a fight. Their combat prowess would not aid them in a fight against any of the other killers. For the most part, they might have a good day where they might beat someone out of nowhere through sheer luck, but they still have some redeeming qualities. And then purple or would get bodied is just a tier I specifically made when I was, theorizing how this would work out, where I just went, these guys would never win in a fight with anyone. Everyone would annihilate them, kind of thing. And what I'm looking at here is gameplay. So if you know your Dead by Daylight killers by abilities, you will see that I'll sit there and go, okay, these killers have certain powers that are really good or really overpowered. So for example, I'm not looking at the Plague and her vomit as this, oh, well, she's just puking on you. No, I'm seeing it as she is giving you the Plague very, very rapidly, and then she can also damage you with red bile, that sort of thing. I'm also looking at lore, so I will not only just be considering the gameplay aspects of the character. I'll also be looking at their lore. So I'll also sit there and go, okay, well, the Plague, has these very strong aspects with her powers, but she also is not much of a killer. She is a priestess of some ancient Mesopotamian god, and she isn't necessarily going to go on and put up like a great fight or strategize or anything like that. And then I'll also be looking at lore outside of Dead by Daylight for the few killers that are from licensed products, such as Pyramid Head, such as Bubba from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, that sort of thing. And, so I'm trying to remember right now how many killers there are without looking at the actual number. I think there are... Jeez. I literally just looked at that point. There's 44 killers in the game, so a lot to go through. Let's just start right from the top. I'm not going to start right from the top. So I mentioned lore, I mentioned gameplay, I mentioned, outside content, and then I kind of have like this little notepad here as to, how I feel about their physical prowess. So physical prowess is something that I'm looking at. It's where size will be a factor. This won't be, sexist or gendered in any way. There are multiple women or female killers, I should say, that will be going into S and A tier, despite their physical prowess or because of their physical prowess. I'm going to be looking at their strategic ability. So, if they're capable of actually putting on a fight and knowing what they're doing. Their supernatural abilities. Some killers do not have a supernatural ability whatsoever. I'm looking at the Trickster and the Trapper, for example, no supernatural abilities at all. So they would just immediately get an F for doesn't have one. But, other killers such as the Demogorgon, the Plague, let's say Vecna, the Lich, they would all, get really high scores because they're supernatural abilities, theoretically. Then I have Endurance. So in terms of killers like the Singularity is a robot. The Singularity need only not have its structural integrity destroyed. It can go for long periods of time, moving. It's not something that you can easily kill. Whereas with someone like the Clown might be tough, but if you can somehow manage to outpace him, slow him down, he is an unhealthy guy. That's part of his design, is that he's extremely unhealthy. Then he becomes a lot easier to beat. So, these are a lot of things that I'm taking into consideration. And then, there might be a special category here and there that I'll bring up and consider and whatnot. And the way that I will decide, ranking within the tier is, almost like entirely, head to head. Wood, pyramid head, beat. I'm just grabbing someone at random. Would pyramid head, be able to beat the Death Slinger, for example? That sort of thing. So without further ado, let's get into it, and let's grab our first killer. So we're looking at the Trapper here. The Trapper, he is the first killer ever added to the game, with special abilities that wasn't just, it moves. So we're starting from square one here. What we know about the Trapper is he's kind of this guy from a rich family background, kind of worked in the coal mines a little bit for his dad, or worked with coal miners type thing. Became a serial killer out of cruelty. He's a big dude, has a bunch of bear traps. He sets bear traps strategically, catches people in bear traps, kills them after trapping them with his bear traps. That's his whole modus operandi. And is the Trapper, this really powerful guy? In terms of physical prowess, I'd have to say that the Trapper is, above average. If you look at his character model, you can see he's quite muscular, but he's not just showmanship muscular. He's actually muscular and in pretty good shape. Again, a big dude. I think in a fight, if you're to take him mano a mano, regular guy to regular guy, if it were just overpowering people, he has you there. In most scenarios. In terms of strategic ability, I do think the Trapper does have a set of strategic ability. When you're playing him in game, it's all about strategy. How are you going to set your traps? How are you going to catch the survivors? Because if you're not catching the survivors in your traps, then you're not going anywhere as the Trapper. But also lore-wise, strategically, he's not all that intelligent. He's somewhat intelligent. It's not like he's stupid. But in terms of that capability, that's where he kind of falls apart. He's not that great in that regard. Supernatural abilities, he has none whatsoever. Unless you count him moving slightly faster after he sets a trap, which, doesn't make sense. Endurance, he can obviously take a bear trap to the leg and then act like nothing happened after he rips the bear trap off of his leg. But he still gets slowed down. I don't think the Trapper in any way, shape, or form is, far more enduring than some of our top killers on this list. I think at the end of the day, I would look at things and say the Trapper, gets kind of like a C for endurance, maybe a B for endurance. I mean, if we're looking at his unique perks, brutal strength, should be an indication that he's quite strong and all these things. But I think at the end of the day, what he really has going for him is pretty good physical prowess, okay strategy, but no supernatural abilities, no it factor, and very middling endurance. So I'm going to put him in C tier. Now, let's look at the Wraith. The Wraith, likewise, actually, unlike the Trapper, doesn't really have a lot of physical prowess at all. If you look at the Wraith's body at any time, it's quite thin, it's very lanky. He's not really a muscular guy whatsoever. He might be lean in some regards, but in some regards, he's just way too skinny. His arms are, far too thin. His legs are thin. He's barely balancing. He's got this crook in his neck. He's got burn marks all over his body that don't serve a purpose whatsoever. So in terms of physical prowess, I actually kind of put the Wraith at a D. But in terms of strategic ability, I think, he might be slightly better than the Trapper, if not the same. He can move incredibly quickly when he's cloaked. It's all about cloaking. But, it's all about planning, where am I going to go? You have to be all over the map when playing as the Wraith. I think, if the Wraith were a real person, or in this fictional setting where they're all fighting each other, the Wraith would be putting up a big fight against most of the other characters. But let's also look at supernatural abilities. I think the Wraith has very strong supernatural abilities, being able to go invisible and being able to uncloak himself. But one of the main problems when we're looking at the Wraith is that we, as survivor players, for example, when we're attacked by the Wraith, we can't fight him. If I were to hear some guy ringing a bell, I might jump a little bit and turn around, and he might get the jump on me. But there's also a good chance that if I were a killer in this game, for example, if I heard the bell ringing, I'd turn around and smack him with something, right? And what would the Wraith do? And that brings me into his endurance. I don't think that the Wraith is particularly durable. His cloaking does not, keep him alive or anything like that. It doesn't protect him in any way other than keeping him out of sight. So all this plays into his supernatural abilities, which I think are an A+, right? But in terms of endurance, he gets no protection, endurance-wise. In terms of strategic ability, he's okay. In terms of physical prowess, he's quite low. The only thing he has going for him is he's quite fast. So I'd actually place the Wraith here in C tier. Alright, now we're looking at Billy. Hillbilly's a very interesting guy. He's going to be our first guy where we actually look at an it factor here. But let's talk about physical prowess first. Hillbilly is strong, right? We can all acknowledge that the Hillbilly is strong. But is he stronger than the Trapper? Is he stronger than the Wraith? I think he is stronger than the Wraith for sure. But in terms of, is he stronger than the Trapper? No. So he's kind of in the middle in that regard. I mean, we have a lot of reasons why, right? The Hillbilly, spent the vast majority of his life living inside of a bricked up room and was only really let out to, like, smash chickens from adolescence all the way to adulthood. It wasn't until he, got the jump on his father and a police officer did he finally escape and, become this rampaging killer. But I will give the Billy this. He's really, really fast. So normally I'd sit there and go, well, he's kind of like this hunchbacked, really, not right in all the right places where, his elbow looks particularly vulnerable. For example, if you snapped his elbow, it might be somewhat easy with how crooked and how skinny it is and how exposed it is, and how it can barely carry anything, and it's only really being carried by the weight or by the tensile strength of a bone. But at the same time, he's extremely fast. He is the fastest moving character physically without having to use supernatural powers whatsoever in the entire game. He can run across the whole map. There you go. That's your Hillbilly. So physical prowess, where normally I would have probably given him a D, I gotta bump that up. I've got to give him credit. He's super fast, and that's going to play a key role in what he does. That's more a B+, A- area. In terms of strategic ability, I don't think the Hillbilly, lore-wise, has any strategic ability whatsoever. He just goes out into the woods and kills people. Obviously, there are less strategic killers than that, to a degree. But I think that's, a D- at best. But, he's not the worst. But strategic ability, yeah, not so much. Supernatural abilities, I mean, we've gotten this idea that the Billy has some slight supernatural ability recently with how his chainsaw begins to glow with blue, ephemeral light and fire and flame. So maybe that's, something to look at, but it's still like a D- to a D level of supernatural ability. In terms of endurance, just to quickly get off of supernatural abilities, because he does technically have a little bit of it. Endurance-wise, the Billy is all the way up there. You'd think that he'd be like this guy that you can easily snap. Like, I literally just said earlier, it looks like you can easily break his elbow, and that's true. and you probably could hurt him really bad if you could fight back against him, but he's just way too fast. Stamina-wise, he is just out of this world. Can run across the map nonstop for minutes. And I think that gnarled flesh, that graft that goes from the side of his head all the way down his arm, that's looks pretty tumorous, and he is covered in these like thick tumors. I don't know if they're benign or malignant, but I've gotten this idea that Billy, might have some thicker skin, so in a fight he might be okay for a few shots. But yeah, that's what I'm looking at in terms of the Hillbilly in terms of endurance. I think I'd probably put him at like a C- for endurance. Really got to give him a lot of extra points for that speed and stamina. But now we really got to talk about the special factor, which is the chainsaw. Obviously, in real life, chainsaws are really not an effective killing or fighting weapon. They break pretty quickly, they gunk up pretty quickly, as we've learned through our true crime documentaries, or if you've done anything with a chainsaw, hopefully not hurt anybody, but if you've done anything with a chainsaw, you'll find that, after digging into something that isn't wood, something that's a little bit more flesh or sticky, or, something that can really gum up the chain or the blades of your chainsaw, that it's only effective after one or two uses. Obviously, in a fight, a one-on-one fight, if you just smacked someone with a chainsaw blade, they're probably going to die, right? If, someone hit you in the thigh and cut an artery, something like that, you're going to bleed out and die, right? Unless you're taken to the hospital, and you have to be taken to the hospital pretty quickly, and I doubt any of these killers are going to the hospital anytime soon. Well, maybe one, but, she doesn't really count. And especially if we're in the realm of the entity, I don't think there are any hospitals around. But, that it factor, that special factor of having the chainsaw in the first place, that's like A+ to S- tier. That bumps Hillbilly all the way up to B tier. He is definitely more likely to beat the Trapper or the Wraith in a fight. Now let's look at the Nurse. The Nurse is probably our most supernatural killer that we've discussed so far. I think actually absolutely. Excuse me. But she's got a lot going against her, and obviously when you play Dead by Daylight, a lot of people would have, at least in the past, before her nerfs, would have considered the Nurse one of the best killers in the game. Almost without a doubt. Now, Nurse is a lot easier to handle. A little bit better about beating Nurses, and their, blink attack does not count as basic attack. But anyways, moving on from in-game lore. The Nurse is this teleporting, blinking entity that can snap all the way across different parts of the world. And the only sign of you knowing that she's around is that she kind of lets out this like choked scream or wail, breathless scream from beyond, to know that, oh, she's coming for me. But I think in terms of physical prowess, let's just get started off there. The Nurse is F. She is at an F. Other than the fact that she can levitate, which, for me ties more into her supernatural abilities, the Nurse, has no physically redeeming qualities whatsoever. If you hit her with something heavy enough, she is going to crumple. But in terms of strategic ability, I think she's pretty smart. She's proven that she's pretty smart in terms of the way she goes about methodically killing people, both gameplay-wise, if you've ever been a Nurse player, played against a Nurse, that's somewhat good, or in terms of her lore, when she cleansed Crotus Pren Asylum, she had a methodic and very particular way of killing dozens upon dozens of people without actually getting caught. Very Nurse Ratched type of situation. And I think, for that alone, the Nurse should at the very least get a B or a B+ for strategic ability, but still an F for physical prowess. Supernatural abilities, that's where she really shines. I think that's an S minus for sure. Being able to levitate, being able to float around, being able to blink, teleport, and obviously see through a bag on your head. You know, the nurse gets that. You know, on every level, the nurse, you know, should just get that for supernatural ability. Endurance wise, I would put the nurse at a D minus at best. I'm not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure she would be F tier in terms of her endurance. You know, she runs out of breath very quickly. She's extremely slow. She can barely raise her hacksaw in the air to hit someone with. And after she hits someone, she is just like super tuckered out after. So I think that has a lot to do with everything. And being able to have like this really strong supernatural ability and decent enough decent enough strategic ability. I still don't think the nurse is actually like a strategic master. I don't remember what I just said for how I would rank her strategic ability, but she isn't a combat master, right? She serial killed a bunch of people in an asylum. A lot of people who were bedridden. Her supernatural abilities carry her out of D tier, but for me, I place her in C tier, but I'd still place her above the Trapper here, and I think I would place her above the Wraith as well. Let's talk about Michael Myers from the Halloween franchise. In game, Michael Myers is just known to stalk his victims, and after he's done stalking them, he becomes, you know, this super killer and can knock anyone down that he reaches. And his biggest weakness is how long it takes to get ready for him to start killing people en masse. But at the same time, his weakness is a bit of an asset, and you can play with his weakness as if it were his only ability, and you could win games that way, because he becomes this silent shadow kind of thing. It's really hard to notice that he's around. He's this silent stalker. Personally, I find that physically, Michael Myers is incredibly strong. You know, A plus for certain. I don't think he is the most physically fit of all the characters, but he's definitely way up there. Strategic capability, I don't really know that much. I think with the Halloween franchise as a whole, you don't really see Michael Myers strategizing so much. He's just kind of like this unstoppable juggernaut. I haven't watched all the Halloween movies, so I'm sure there's someone in the comments who's going to sit there and go, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. In Halloween Returns, you know, he set up a whole Rube Goldberg machine that killed the entire town of Haddonfield. You know, like, okay, I'm sorry. But in terms of strategic ability, I'd probably put him at a D+. You know, a D+ just because he can stay out of sight, and he does know, you know, when someone sees him and goes, oh, that's a really big dude in a creepy mask with a giant kitchen knife, he's like, okay, I'll move to the side, and he moves to the side to get out of sight. All right, you know, I'll give that to Michael Myers. But in terms of supernatural abilities, he doesn't really die. I think that's a supernatural ability in and of itself, is that he, you know, and this will tie into his endurance as well. So I'll give him like a D for supernatural abilities, like, you know, which is, it increases his average for sure because it's not an F, because he doesn't lack them. But what Michael Myers does extremely best, so we're looking at an A+ for physical prowess, a D+ for strategic ability, a D to D+ for supernatural abilities, but it's his endurance. In any Halloween movie, you can see, you know, Michael Myers, he will get hurt, he will get stunned, you know, he will get hit, but it doesn't matter what you throw at him. You can set the dude on fire, and he just keeps walking. He's fine. He doesn't care. That, to me, is what epitomizes an S tier level, like solid S tier, if not S+ tier level of a category. And for Michael Myers, he that really drags him up to really high levels. And I think that with his really high physical prowess and really high endurance, being able to have a little bit of supernatural ability on top of that, which plays into his endurance, and then, not the worst strategic ability in the world, but I would put him in A tier. I think he could beat most of the killers on this list for sure. Next up is the Hag. Where do I put the Hag? Well, physical prowess. She is somewhat feral. She's very emaciated. She is rail thin, very tiny. She's skin and bones. She's missing large parts of her flesh or of her body because it's been cut away and eaten. She lacks iron. She's slowly turning into a tree. That's just an F in my books in terms of physical prowess. Like, she has a sharp hand, but it's not that great. Strategic ability, again, she's feral. She doesn't really have a strategic ability. She operates mostly on instinct. If we're looking at her ability to create little phantasmal traps on the ground or in the mud, and someone steps on them, and then she pops up, and then she goes, my innate instinctual magic has served me well, then okay, we might be able to, give the Hag like an F plus here, but it's not really strategic. She's just kind of like crazy, and I feel like in many ways the only thing that's driving her strategy is the entity and not even herself. Supernatural abilities, she obviously has them. I still give them a D minus. They're a very basic trap. It's a little jump scare type trap. And I think if she were going head to head with almost any of these killers, like you put Michael Myers in front of her, and Mike steps on a trap, and she goes, "Bah!" Michael Myers will just turn around and go, dead. Like that's it for the Hag, right? So I think like a D minus because she has them, so we have to like give her points for that. In terms of endurance, same thing I talked about with physical prowess. She is so physically frail. Like, yes, she is scary. She is feral, but she is clearly very breakable. She is crooked. She is hunched. She is, she can't stand up straight. She is very, very fragile. She doesn't have that it factor for anything. I really would put her and would get bodied. I think the Hag would get beaten fairly easily by just about any killer in this game. Next, we're talking about the Doctor. So, the Doctor, we know him as this electric shock guy. He's able to project electricity across a field or a range in order to induce madness into the target. Let's start with physical prowess. If you look at, the Doctor's physical stance, he's quite tall, but, he's got really this average dad bod build, and not like the tough dad bod from the Midwest, like a New Englander, South New Englander dad bod, like from Rhode Island or Connecticut or Southern Massachusetts type dad bod, where you're not really a lumberjack, you're just kind of this dude. Maybe, I guess, to be fair to the New Englanders, we could say it's more like a New York build, but not like the tough New York build, just like a New York guy. Anyway, I don't really know what I'm going for with that. In terms of physical prowess, he's not emaciated, he's not super weak, and he's not slow or anything like that. So I guess I'd give him a C, right down the middle. He like, if you punched him in the gut, he might turn over, but he might also recover quickly type thing. Strategic ability, he's a doctor, he's not stupid. His whole playstyle revolves around him strategically camping out survivors and finding them and doing all sorts of stuff in that regard. But in terms of like who he's hunting, his style relies totally on him being the predator and he's looking for the prey, right? In a fight against other predators, I don't think he really does all that well, but I think it's okay. At least having that to begin with is better than I'm Miss Instinct, like the hag down there. So I'll give the doctor like a C minus, maybe a D plus at worst, but let's say C minus. Supernatural abilities. I don't think his supernatural abilities are bad. He has them. In terms of fighting other killers, unlike the hag, where yes, she can scare you a little bit, but she'll immediately get knocked over. The doctor might have some use for supernatural abilities in a fight, which is to say, he can cast his electric shocks and make his opponents a little bit more insane, and then they hallucinate. Let's say they hallucinate seeing the doctor, and they attack that hallucination rather than the real doctor. In a fight, that might be useful. Also, hallucinating what resources you have around you because you're nuts. That could be very useful for the doctor. And then on top of that, at full insanity, debilitates you. Let's say, for the sake of giving the doctor a huge fighting chance here, if the doctor got another killer to full insanity, and that killer was not able to snap out of it, they're not able to use their special abilities. Let's say that the hillbilly can't think to use his chainsaw. The nurse cannot remember to blink. The trapper forgets he's even got the bear traps around. The wraith, is so scared. And these are people that could actually get scared. He can't cloak. The hag stops thinking about, its traps and becomes a creature of the purest form of instinct. Let's give the doctor that. In terms of endurance, I think with that supernatural abilities, that puts him at a C plus. But then when we talk about endurance, again, it's more like a D, maybe a D plus. I mean, to be fair, he's not slow, right? So best case scenario, I give him a C minus, but I think he's more like a D or D plus. But with a bunch of D pluses, let's say you got 2 D pluses, one for endurance, one for strategic ability, and he got like a C minus for physical prowess because he's not badly out of shape. He's just kind of a dude, but he's big at the same time. And then supernatural abilities, we can put that at a C plus. That puts him firmly in C tier for sure. Let's talk about Huntress, the best killer ever made. Not really, but a favorite for many. Where would I put the Huntress? Now that you guys have seen 4 people go into C tier, 1 went into B, 1 went into A, 1 went into would get bodied. So where's the D, where's the S? I mean, I'll be honest with you guys, I'm not going to put her in either of those tiers. I just know that off the rip, especially when I tested this before. But when we talk about the Huntress, let's talk about physical prowess first and foremost. We know that the Huntress is this warrior from out in the deep woods and wilds of Russia. I'm not really 100% sure where she's from in Russia, whether she's from Omsk, Siberia, anything like that, or if she's from a place like Sochi, or I'm not remembering my places near the Caucasus, Kalmyk, or Kalmykia or anything like that. But in terms of physical prowess, she is huge, like really tall, very physically fit, extremely muscular, a lot of lean muscle, not just like pure strength muscle. So she's got the slow twitch going on. And, she's extremely accurate. We saw that with her axes. She knows where to throw them. She's accurate with her axes, can hit whatever she wants. And, that's really good for someone who's not using a gun or a crossbow or a bow and arrow or anything like that. Throwing axes can be hard, especially one-handed, and she does it very, very well. We've also found that she is quite stealthy. She is capable of, being very careful on her toes and hiding. That was her whole tome, was showing how, stealthy she was and powerful she was. She took out an entire Soviet brigade. I think it was a Soviet brigade. It may have been a Russian army brigade. I'm not 100% sure. But still, just very, very physically capable. That is an A+ in my book. In terms of strategic abilities, it's the same thing, right? We saw her took out an entire brigade. She did that because she is mentally intelligent. I mean, we can argue about her emotional intelligence is very, very poor, but that's why she's a, killer out in the woods. But in terms of strategic ability, again, an A+, we saw her take out that army brigade, or that troop. I don't know the vernacular all that well. Supernatural ability, though, has none. That's like a pure F. She has no supernatural abilities whatsoever. Endurance-wise, she is very enduring. She is slower than the rest of the killers, on average. Not as slow as the nurse, though. And I think she is faster than the spirit. Either way. She's not the slowest, but she is slower. We don't think that she gets, messed up by pallets worse than anybody else or anything like that. But, in terms of endurance, we'd probably put her at like a B+. I think that's fair. She's never been shot, in the face like Michael Myers has. So unlike Michael Myers, who has like this S+ in endurance, this is where the Huntress falls apart. She doesn't have any endurance. She doesn't have considerable endurance, and she doesn't have any supernatural abilities. So what does that make me want to put her in? Well, that makes me want to put her in A tier, if anything. Now, do I think she is more likely to beat Michael Myers than vice versa? Yes, I do. I actually think the Huntress is way more likely to defeat Michael Myers than Michael Myers is able to defeat the Huntress. And why is that? That is because the Huntress is smarter than Michael. In every situation, the Huntress is smarter than him. The Huntress is just as physically capable as Michael Myers. And her weaknesses, she doesn't really have a supernatural ability like Michael does. She doesn't have this overwhelming endurance like Michael does. But again, this is a huge factor, is her ability to process information and her ability to come up with a plan. Plus, being able to fight at ranged. I think that actually should be her it factor. She's one of those killers with an it factor like Hillbilly. She has a ranged weapon. She is capable of fighting with more than one weapon. Whereas Michael Myers is sitting there with his knife or his lead pipe. And even if Michael's faster, if I'm tossing hatchets at him the whole time, yeah, I expect that at some point, Michael Myers, within those 5 hatchets that the Huntress is normally allotted, will go down. And then in a hand-to-hand combat, the Huntress has reach with an axe compared to a knife, and might cut Michael down for size. I just think she, gets the natural edge over Michael Myers. Now we're looking at Bubba from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is our second movie character. In terms of Bubba's physical prowess, other than the running, I think he's more physically capable than the Hillbilly. Obviously we're just going to put these guys next to each other because we both know that they're going to be next to each other. Physicality, outside of running, Bubba is a lot more physically capable. He's bigger. He's less disproportionate. He's more symmetrical. He's got equal amounts of muscle on both sides. He's got a gut that maybe could protect him. I don't know. The Hillbilly's kind of thin. But in terms of supernatural abilities, has no supernatural abilities like the Hillbilly does. So, okay. Well, first I gotta finish physical prowess. My God. We're not even halfway done, and I'm already like, oh. I would put Bubba as a B+ for physical prowess, which I think is the same place I put Hillbilly, actually. So neck and neck there. Strategic ability, I think just by virtue of Bubba being outside more often and having a healthier relationship with his family might have made him smarter. I don't know. Bubba can hear words. Bubba can understand thoughts and feelings. Maybe that has something to do with it. But unlike the hillbilly who can run around, the entire stage to cut people down, he doesn't really have that going on. But he does have a thinking process, right? He's not tricked. He's trickable, right? But he's not ever fully tricked. You can't trick him all the way. So maybe that's something to put in for Bubba. Endurance-wise, we've seen Bubba get beaten nonstop for multiple movies in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series. It doesn't matter how big he is. He gets stabbed. He gets hit with hammers. He gets shit thrown at him. I think in terms of endurance, that's where he does better than the hillbilly. And then with the it factor of the chainsaw, I assume he might modify his chainsaw a bit to be better at killing people with because of the family he grew up in. And because he's actually able to, they both can repair a chainsaw. So I think that's why without, going into too much detail and, providing specific ranks for Bubba, why I think he is slightly more capable in a fight than the hillbilly and would probably beat the hillbilly in a fight. Let's go on to Freddy Krueger. Freddy Krueger from the Nightmare on Elm Street series is this apparition. He is this specter. He's a ghost who haunts the dreams of... I got mixed up. Michael Myers is from Lambkin Lane, not Haddonfield. So, Freddy Krueger from Haddonfield, I think, is capable of hunting these people throughout their dreams. He's making them, I can't remember if it's narcolepsy, but the one where, you're not getting enough sleep until these people pass out. I think that's, huge in terms of supernatural ability. If we were to talk strictly about physical prowess, Freddy Krueger is okay, right? He's like a B plus A minus territory. He's not physically really all that strong. He's just some guy. But unlike, all these other guys that have come before him, he's got a lot going on in different departments. Strategic ability. He knows your nightmares, man. He fucking haunts your dreams and puts you into the worst possible scenarios because he knows that's what he's good at. So he's going to put you in the worst nightmare imaginable and mess with your brain. I think that dials up the Doctor's strategic ability to 11 because it doesn't matter if you're prey. Even if you're a predator, he can still find your fears and mess with your fears. That puts him real high up. I think that's an S- level strategic ability. Supernatural abilities, S+ all the way. He, that just ties into his strategic ability. I'm not going to go over it again. Endurance-wise, that's also S+. Because we've seen Freddy Krueger get decapitated in the real world and he's still not dead. Freddy Krueger cannot be killed, as far as we're aware. He's unstoppable. Even when you think you've beaten him, he's still waiting around the corner, waiting for his moment to shine again. So he's one of those killers where, you're kind of sitting there and going, oh, it's impossible to kill him. Well, I also kind of sit there and I go, well, it is possible to defeat the killers, or almost all the killers, in some way. But I'm still going to put Freddy Krueger as our first S-tier killer, because he's unstoppable. And because his strategic prowess, his strategic ability revolves... He doesn't even have to plan anything out. He just has to figure out what your nightmare is, which I don't know how he figures it out, but he has the ability to do that. And then he messes with you. That's all Freddy Krueger does. And then, he kills you in your dreams, and you can't kill him back. And he knocks you out. He puts you to sleep in the first place. He's always playing on his playing field, except for Freddy vs. Jason, where he didn't play on his playing field, and they decapitated him, and he was still fine. Now let's talk about Amanda, the pig, the booper. Where do we put Amanda on the tier list? Well, let's talk about Amanda from Saw a little bit more, right? Physical prowess, it varies from movies. Sometimes she's like this giant woman. Sometimes she's this regular-sized woman. Sometimes it's, you get faked out and there's actually two pigs, whatever. Amanda Young, for me, especially when we're using her game model as reference, Physical prowess wise, she might be a little lean, but she's mostly thin. She's kind of regular human sized. She's not a giant like the Doctor, the Wraith, or the Trapper. She's not physically imposing. It helps her in terms of stealthiness. And, stealthiness we are considering here, but, we look at the Huntress who is jacked and also extremely capable in stealth. Amanda's really only capable in stealth. So, I've kind of got to give her a little bit of credit here. C minus. Strategic ability. Amanda's always been about strategy. I mean, she helps build the traps for goodness sake with Jigsaw. But she's mostly just a I'm going to hide in the alley and stab you type person, or I'm going to hide in this alcove that we set and stab you. She has to be on her playing field, I think, in order to succeed. And unlike Freddy Krueger, who can be on his playing field no matter what situation you put him in, Amanda doesn't get that luxury all the time. Supernatural abilities, she doesn't have any. Endurance, I think there is something to say that Amanda is a drug addict or a former drug addict. Even post rehabilitation, she is not what she used to be, if that's being fair. Drugs can really mess up your body for life. And I'm not just saying that because I'm straight edge. It can mess up your brain. It can mess up your chemistry. It can mess up your bones. It can mess you up in so many different ways. It can create clots in certain areas depending on what kind of drugs you're taking. Just a lot of deformities and malignant issues can occur from having a past with addiction, and Amanda had quite the past with addiction. So I think, especially with how she's like average speed in the game, and she only really overpowers someone through the power of surprise, and she gets little sprint bursts of energy. So like, I guess that's something to consider. She's faster than the Doctor on a given day. I guess in terms of endurance, we can put her at like a D plus, C minus. And then she has her it factor. Her it factor being her reverse bear traps. She has to put it on someone's head in the first place. She has it, unlike most, so that gives her a couple of points. So that gives her a D minus rather than a nothing, and that's only like points to increase her grade. I'm not going to take that as something that drags her grade down for the average. I'll put Amanda at the bottom of C tier, and I think that's going to be pretty consistent. As I double check, I'm going to keep Amanda at the bottom of C tier. She is barely out of D tier just because she's proven that she's capable in a fight before, and she's somewhat smart, but can she take the Doctor on? Probably not. Can she take the Trapper on? Probably not. She definitely can't take on anybody who's going to swing a chainsaw into her gut. Much less anybody that's in the A or above tier. So that's where I would put Amanda Young. Jeffrey Hawks or the Clown. We all love the Clown in this house. Jeffrey Hawks is our serial killer clown who has a penchant for fingers. Let's just get started right away. In terms of physical prowess, we know that Jeffrey Hawks is this giant man. We also know that along with being a giant man, like really tall, he's also extremely morbidly obese. And it's mostly a beer belly as far as I'm aware. And while we should not take that as like a negative totally, because size does mean a lot, pure mass can determine a lot in terms of what you're capable of doing and what you're capable of lifting and how you're capable of overpowering somebody in a physical fight. But it also means that it messes up your endurance, which we'll get to, right? In terms of physical prowess, I think the Clown is quite strong. He's not someone that easily gets knocked out. He's clearly got a lot of cushion for the pushing, but he's a strong guy. We've seen that, in his fights and in his chases through the circus. With his tome, when we were learning about his backstory and watching him, actually hunt people down in haunted houses and these sorts of things, and proving that, yeah, he's overweight, he's, looks physically incapable and unassuming and looks like this goofy clown, but he's also deadly. He's extremely deadly, and underestimating him is something to do at your peril. In terms of strategic ability, we do know that the clown is this narcissist, kind of self-centered, narcissistic to a fault. Narcissism in any form is something that is a fault, but to a degree that it affects his ability to kill other people. Like, he's obviously effective, but, he'll sit there and obsess over a raccoon eating his garbage, and then just go, oh, that's going to fuck me up for the rest of the day, how am I supposed to kill this guy if I'm thinking about this raccoon? But at the same time, while that does drag him down a bit in terms of character-wise, being this individual that utilizes vapors and fumes from a tonic that you created because you were the one willing to experiment with chemistry, I think there's something to be said about that. So I think, physical prowess, I'd put him at a B+. Strategic ability, I'd put him at a D+, which really drags him down. But it's there. He's not stupid, but he's there. Supernatural abilities, he has none, so obviously that's an F. That drags him down a bit. Endurance-wise, I would surprisingly say that he is quite durable, but he totally relies on his tonic and antidote. He is proven to be unaffected by poisons. He is not affected by his own tonic that he created, that other people are always affected by, because he has created a natural resistance to it. But then when we look at his antidote, we can see that he is able to take chems to his benefit, or inhale chemical fumes for his benefit to make him move faster, to give him highs. And he's not really a guy that slows down a lot. We sit there and we're like, oh, he's this fat guy, and yeah, that does play a role, especially in a long, prolonged fight. But if he is able to take drugs in order to satisfy himself, I think at that point we can just say, oh, Jeffrey Hawks, you're more enduring than we thought. So I'll give him like a B- for endurance here. Special, he doesn't really have a special. I'm going to put him in C tier, right above Amanda, because I think he can beat Amanda in a fight. There's a good chance he could beat the Doctor in a fight, but I do kind of give the Doctor a little bit of an edge in terms of strategic ability. And I think, he can take people like the Hag any day. Alright. Let's talk about the Spirit. Still nobody in D tier yet. And which is funny, because I do have quite a few killers in D tier, from my recollection. Spirit is a ghost, like Freddy Krueger, but she manifests in the physical world. Unlike Freddy Krueger, who most of the time is only relegated to his own realm. As a specter, I find her invincible. You can tell based off of, the fact that she's cut up and full of glass shards and is acting like, it's not an issue. I mean, obviously she's angry about it, but that's enough for me to say the Spirit is, extremely enduring. Physical prowess-wise, extremely fast. We know through her lore that despite, her father, getting the jump on her and attacking her with a literal katana, she was able to defend herself and also defeat her attacker as she was pushed out of a glass window. That in terms of physical prowess, that's an A for me. You're clearly strong. You're clearly physically capable. You are small, but just because you are small does not mean you're not physically capable. You've proven that you are. That's A tier for me in terms of physical prowess. In terms of strategic ability, gameplay-wise, that's where we really need to judge her strategic ability, because other than her survival instincts when her father attacked her, that's all we really have to go on. But even then, she's one of the most strategic killers in the game. She's harder to play than the nurse, in my opinion. That's all strategy. That's an S tier for me. In terms of supernatural abilities, being able to discorporate and pop in and out of reality, and attack people that have no idea you're there, and messing with their brain and them having no idea where you are, that's S tier for me. In terms of endurance, she got pushed through a window and she's fine. And she's also a ghost, so she has nothing to worry about in terms of how long she's going to last. And also, if someone chops her with a sword, there's a good chance it'll phase right through. Who knows? She's a spirit. That's S tier for me. That's above Freddy Krueger for me. I think she could beat Freddy Krueger because she's not killable. And if you chop her up, she doesn't care. She can form back together. She can chop up Freddy Krueger. He's still going to be headless, right? Next up, we've got the Legion. Joey, Susie, Sally, Amy, Frank, Todd, Hunk, whatever. All 4 of those kids. Now, this will be a little interesting, but I don't think it changes my ranking whatsoever. In terms of physical prowess, D-. These are teenagers, maybe a D, because teenagers can be pretty physically fit. But these are teenagers who hang out in an abandoned cold ski resort. They clearly don't take good care of themselves. I think one of them has an anxiety disorder, but I'm not 100% sure. Physical prowess, these are teenagers. D, right? They're strong enough to be, kind of scary teenagers. So automatically we're already thinking of them in the D tier. In terms of strategic ability, if we were talking about on their own, D- at best, but probably an F, right? Because they're just their strategy is we're going to run at someone and stab the shit out of them, right? Gameplay wise, it's we're gonna run at someone, stab them, 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 and then maybe we'll knock someone down after and try to kill them. So, that's not really a strategy. That's just you stabbing people and being a hooligan and a miscreant. A murderous miscreant and hooligan, but a hooligan and a miscreant. That's like F tier for me. In a group, if the whole idea is we're going to crowd around people and like stab them and they won't be able to know what's going on because we're all moving so very fast, and we're cutting them up because we're taking our live and young forms, and knowing that usually this would be a detriment because we'd get bodied in a one-on-one fight and using it to our advantage, then we're talking more D tier, like strictly D tier. But in terms of strategic ability, I put them in F tier. No supernatural abilities, that's an automatic F. And then endurance-wise, they're teenagers. They are able to vault over pallets, but the minute they get hit by, a pallet themselves, they are totally lost and they get totally knocked over. I think that's D- at best. And so that leads me to put Legion in would get bodied. These are teenagers. These are just kids. They're not huge like the Trapper. They don't have any supernatural abilities. They can run somewhat fast. I'll give them that. But they're not enduring. And, we've been shown through their lore time and again that they bungle like the most basic crimes all the time. Even in their cosmetic lore, it's like, Susie killed a shopkeeper because she got caught shoplifting and didn't know what to do. That doesn't tell me this is an intelligent person. These are a bunch of idiot kids. If you put them against a Trapper, I think the Trapper would just see, Frank coming at him, and Frank might get a shot at him, sure, but would immediately knock him down. I do think that they're, better off against the Hag. I think that the Hag might screw them up a little bit, but I do think they could beat the Hag just because of how weak the Hag is physically. But that's where I'm at. Legion and would get bodied tier. Let's talk about the Plague. The Plague, Adidas, is a Mesopotamian priestess of what I think is an unnamed Mesopotamian god. She gets the Plague in the real world and leads her followers, who are also ridden with Plague, to a mountain to die, and she disappears. Physical prowess, I think, her being big will give her some points. She is extremely tall. I think she is the tallest female character in the game, but don't quote me on that, because I think the artist might edge her out. I'm not sure. but she's taller, so, that's got to be points to consider for her. But she's also a plague victim and clearly desiccating in front of our very eyes. I gotta be honest. I gotta put Adiris the Plague in like C minus tier for physical prowess for sure. Strategic ability, she's not a killer, right? In terms of gameplay, there is strategy involved. You're puking all over people, getting them sick, and like strategically making them sick, forcing them to go to fountains or continue to have the plague in order to get your red bile, which is going to be very, very deadly. But do I think that's strategically sound in a match against a killer? I think if the plague were to puke all over the Legion, even if it was a 4-on-1 fight, yeah, they'd go, oh man, I'm puking, like I gotta go drink some clean water to feel better. And then that gives her that kind of advantage. But if she does that on Bubba's gonna go, okay, I'm puking now, it hits you with a hammer, you're dead, right? At least that's where I'm at with that. In terms of strategic ability, I would give that maybe like a D plus. I think it would be like B plus if we're talking about predator versus prey situation. But again, this is predator versus predator situation, and lore wise, she has shown no capabilities in terms of combat strategy because she's just a priest, right? That's all. She's a priestess who, is from Mesopotamia. She was never a warrior. She might have been a street rat, I think, or street urchin, orphan. But I'm not 100% on that. So that she gets a D on. In terms of supernatural ability, that's where, she really shines. I think I'd have to give her a B plus in that regard. To be able to sit there and go, yeah, your supernatural abilities are quite strong when they work. And for a lot of these people, they might actually work. Like, if she puked all over Amanda Young might have to consider, oh, I need to go take care of myself and, like, try and strike her on a hit-and-run sort of situation. I've already said my piece about the Legion. A Ghostface, would have to do that. The Skull Merchant would have to do that. So she has a lot of people that she could take down using her puke. Specifically, that's her greatest asset, so that's what we need to consider. But in terms of endurance, other than the fact that she was able to walk with a bunch of plague victims up to a mountain and she was able to survive her plague, she's still missing a toe, she's still rotting, she's still in constant pain. I think, with a strong enough hit, you could topple her over. I'm putting her endurance at like a D minus. So with like three Ds and then 1 B plus, I think those D's really edge her into the D tier. That's our first D tier killer, is the plague. And I'm trying to be as fair as possible with that, but that's where I think legitimately she belongs. Next up, we're talking about the Ghostface. This is my main, one of my two mains in Dead by Daylight in terms of killers. Danny Olson, in terms of physical prowess, has proven that he is capable in stealth and he's capable in a fight. If we're using the movies of Scream as an example, which we shouldn't because technically this isn't Scream, it's just the Ghostface mask, then, it's kind of a different, story about, oh, the Ghostface is clumsy and, gets hit by all these pallets and is falling over during every chase because that's the iconic chase with the Ghostface. Yeah, sure, whatever. When I am playing as Ghostface, I note that this guy is stealthy, and he plans out his kills, he plans out his attacks, so physically, he's capable, he's in somewhat good, but very, very lean shape. He's not big, so if he were to get overpowered, he really would get overpowered, but he's physically capable, can run at a solid distance, he's able to crouch walk, which not every adult can do. Shout out to all my friends in their mid to late 20s. Who cannot squat anymore because it just, hurts their legs like crazy. We're all getting old. Danny doesn't have to worry about that. For me, that's like a B tier, B plus tier for physical prowess. In terms of strategic ability, he's proven time again that he is smart. He's a calculated killer. That's what his whole tome was about, was how he could calculate killing an entire group of teenagers or something like that, at a movie theater or a stadium. I can't remember the exact situation, but he was able to methodically plan out everything, and then he's able to methodically plan out how he's going to get away with it. That's A tier for me. That's pretty good for Ghostface. But where he falls behind, no supernatural ability, even though we want to say he has a supernatural ability, which is why he has the floating little scarves flying around him, which is supposed to symbolize the entity has blessed him kind of thing. He doesn't really have any supernatural abilities whatsoever. And then on top of that, his endurance, very basic. Like, he's not moving quickly, he can crouch walk, but that doesn't help him in a fight, really, other than to stalk his prey. That more plays into his strategic abilities and his physical prowess. I think that's more like a D-, and despite having really good physical prowess and really good strategic ability, lack of a supernatural ability and lack of any considerable endurance puts him kind of in... where in C tier would I put him? I think I'd put him at the top of C tier because I think he could hunt down and kill the nurse. I think he could hunt down and kill the trapper. Any of these guys, really. He's smart. That's what he's got. It's like the Huntress. He's really smart, but unlike the Huntress, he's not physically capable. And then on top of that, doesn't have a supernatural power like Michael Myers does, which would have pushed him above a little bit. And also no it factor. Unless you want to argue his it factor is that he is really appreciated by the entity, but I'm not going to do that. Next up is the dog, the Demogorgon, from Stranger Things. I'll be honest, I don't watch a lot of Stranger Things, but I did watch the first season, beginning to end. He is like an alien, but as far as I'm aware, isn't an alien. It's a little complicated. Yeah, he's this big, imposing monster. In terms of physical prowess, yeah, he's got it. That's an A, for sure. He is physically strong, he is able to pounce at large distances. He's a hunter, like he is a hunter by nature. He's not a predator in a, predator-prey species. He's a predator from a predator species. Gotta give it to the Demogorgon there. So, A+ for physical prowess. In terms of strategic ability, I think that's his biggest weakness. He operates much like the Hag, where he's operating basically on instinct. But unlike the Hag, who's purely operating off of hunger and a need to drink blood to survive, the Demogorgon can pick and choose his battles, and he can move in and out of combat. So I think strategic ability, where the Hag had a D- at best, the Demogorgon is more like middle of the pack. C- I think is fair to place the Demogorgon in terms of strategic ability. Supernatural abilities, guy can create teleportation pits, can teleport, all these other sorts of things. His ability to move from one place to the other makes him very effectively mobile. Do I think it is as powerful as the Spirit or Freddy Krueger? No, but I have to give him a B+ in spite of it all. And then we're looking at endurance. Endurance-wise, I remember him getting gunned down at the end of Stranger Things, Season 1. But, he's not weak. He's very fast. He's a predator animal. He's able to pounce. And he is able to survive a lot of punishment. He's not a chump when guns are brought into the fore. I think, that's a very, very reasonable way to just say, yeah, Demogorgon's pretty strong. He's pretty endurable. No it factor. Pretty decent, supernatural ability. Strategic ability, just kind of low. But I would put his endurance at like a solid A-. And I think at the end of the day, that puts him near the top of B tier, for sure. He is definitely more capable than either of the Chainsaw Boys. But yeah, he's like this scary alien from space, so we've really got to give it to him. Now, who do we talk about? I really want to, hang out with my fiance here and her dumb cat, but I'm already over halfway through this video, and at this point, I just gotta fucking buckle down. Let's talk about the Oni. Another one of my favorite killers, Kazan Yamaoka. Called the Oni because he's this giant ogre of a man, and because he was such a deadly samurai, Ronin. he was nicknamed the Oni and then kind of embodied that nickname to his chagrin. He doesn't like that he has. So he's just this giant monster, and he's this huge berserker. So let's talk about physical prowess. Very, very strong. Obviously, the most physically massive individual of the entire roster, the most muscular by far. That's an S for me. Strict S for physical prowess. Huge. If anyone takes a shot from his Boko Club, they're going down. They're getting knocked the F out, dude. Strategic ability, the Oni is not stupid. I mean, in gameplay, you have to know how to play him in order to succeed with him. But in terms of lore, he's not an idiot. He is a hunter. You know, he is a mercenary by trade. He's going out killing people that should be capable of stopping him, but he knows how to take people down. One, because he understands how physically strong he is, but he also understands his limits. I think that's an A+ strategic ability. You know, just being capable of doing what you need to do. Supernatural abilities, this is where he kind of falls behind a little bit, because while him using his Boko Club and getting to his Demon Dash and Demon Strikes and all that is his supernatural ability, and that really tied into his physical prowess, which we just called an S. In terms of supernatural ability, the way he gets his supernatural ability is kind of weak, and at the end of the day, I think if we were talking about a literal fight, I think he would use that Boko Club no matter what, regardless of supernatural ability, no holds barred. It's more about a rage thing. Depends on how you really interpret his supernatural ability. Is he actually absorbing blood? It's questionable. Endurance-wise, also really strong. I'd put him at an A. So lots of A's, one S, a supernatural ability that's kind of a B+, you know, which kind of dragged down his grade a little bit. I don't really know if we should consider an it factor with this, but that would only give him points to begin with, and I'm pretty comfortable putting the Oni really high up in A tier. I think that's very fair for the Oni. I think he could beat Michael Myers for sure. I think he could screw him up, because Oni is very physically capable. Next up, we got the Death Slinger, Caleb Quinn, our cowboy bounty hunter with the Redeemer harpoon gun. And what do we have to say about our boy with the Redeemer harpoon gun? Well, let's start with physical prowess. He's very tall, but he's not muscular whatsoever. You know, kind of just has more scars than anything else. Has this huge leg brace that keeps his leg locked. He can't bend over significantly or anything like that. I think that's a huge detriment, but he is strong, and I think when it comes to his physical prowess, we've got to remember that his physical prowess relies mainly on his dexterity and his ability to make a shot rather than his ability to be in a prolonged melee fight. I would give him a B- in that specific instance. Maybe a C+. When we're talking about strategic ability, super smart. Bounty hunter. Same thing as the Oni. I'm not even going to get into it all that much. I'm just going to say A, straight up for strategic ability. Supernatural abilities, has none. That's an F. That drags him down a lot. But he does have an it factor, which is going to make up for it. Endurance-wise, I haven't noticed that the Death Slinger is particularly weak in any scenario. Yes, he does have the leg brace. He's very Stone Cold Steve Austin that way. But in terms of endurance, I think he's middle of the road. I have nothing to judge whether or not he is capable endurance-wise. I will admit I haven't checked out his personal story from his tome whatsoever, other than the fact that he has this leg brace that really hampers him. But I'll just give him a C+, B- there as well. But here's where things get interesting. I think of all the killers that have an it factor, which there are very few killers that do have an it factor, Deathslinger has the it factor in the form of his Redeemer gun. And I think that is an S++ tier it factor. Yeah, Hillbilly has his chainsaw. You get shot with a gun. Yeah, Bubba has his chainsaw. He got shot with a gun. Who else has a it factor? Huntress. Yeah, she has these hatchets. She got shot with a gun, with a chain on the end. I think that's more than enough to propel Caleb into a really high spot. I don't think that the S++ will bring him into S tier or anything like that. But I do feel as though Caleb really propels really high up to B tier because of all those things. So he's got like this low endurance. He's got a somewhat weak physical prowess. His strategic ability is very good, but actually I wouldn't probably call it S++. Let's be a little bit more realistic. It's an S-, but it's still strong enough where he's really high up on B tier, very B+, edging A tier right now. Same with Demogorgon. But I don't think he can beat the Demogorgon in a fight. I think if you shoot the Demogorgon with a harpoon gun, he's just going to pounce on you and rip you to shreds. Let's talk about P-Head. Pyramid Head from the Silent Hill series is this nigh indestructible executioner from your dreams and nightmares and from your traumas. If you cannot overcome your traumas, you cannot beat him. He has all these supernatural powers. Let's talk about physical prowess. One of the strongest killers in the game. I don't think he is stronger than the Oni physically, but I think he's almost as strong as the Oni physically. So, A+, right? Or no, we put Oni S tier for physical prowess. I'll put, Pyramid Head S- for physical prowess. Strategic ability, he's not stupid, right? He's only outsmarted by a human that he doesn't actually want to kill. He only wants to traumatize him, right? Pyramid Head, his whole thing is knowing exactly who you are at any given time. I think that just by knowing who you are at any given time gives him a real edge. I'll give him an S- for strategic ability. Supernatural abilities, huge. These Chains of Torments, his Chain Blasts, his Cages of Atonement, all these other things where he's messing with your trauma and weaponizing it, that's pretty strong. I'll give it an A+, I think, is where I would probably put it. I think that's... Actually, I think I'd put it at S+ as well, I think that's where or S tier as well. In terms of endurance, you shoot him and he's fine. You can only kill him at the end of the game when you've overcome your traumas. Congratulations. That's how you kill Pyramid Head, is if you overcome your traumas. I don't think you have a therapist in the middle of a fight, though, and I don't think there are a lot of killers that have a lot of unresolved trauma that they can just go, no, I resolved that years ago. I'm putting Pyramid Head near the top. He is an S tier. If he's not at the top, he is an S tier. He's one of the strongest killers in the entire roster. Good luck beating him. The Blight. So, the Blight has a lot of qualities that are similar to the Hag down here in Wood Get Bodied. But what makes him different? Well, he's feral, like the Hag. But he still kind of has this mind. But let's talk about physical prowess. In terms of physical prowess, the Blight is way, 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 way better than the Hag. It's hard to lose to the Hag in any regard. But he's way better than the Hag. He's the second fastest killer in the game, only behind the Hillbilly. That says a lot, all things considered. He is somewhat strong, don't let his lithe and crooked form belie his innate strength. He is a monster, for certain. And he's feral at all times. That feral nature, which was kind of the only thing that was going for the Hag in terms of getting her out of F tier, which she didn't, was her being a feral kind of instinctual monster. The Blight has all those feral and instinctual qualities. So I kind of want to give that like a C tier just because he's also more physically capable than the Hag, and he's stronger than the Hag. He's able to break a pallet or a wooden wall with one strike of a walking cane. That's pretty strong. Maybe even C+. Strategic ability, he's still kind of feral. He's a monster, but his mind is kind of more with him. Still operating off of instinct. Probably would put him at a D or a D+ tier in terms of strategic ability. Supernatural abilities, we'll just call his Blight Serum supernatural because it is supernatural. I think being reliant on a substance, so if he runs out of that substance at any point, that's when he becomes extremely weak and can't do anything with any of his powers. That's his huge drawback. If he could do this unlimited, it would be A- at the very least. But with that in mind, it's more of like a strict C. That's where he's at. In terms of endurance, if you knock down the blight and you break him, you know, it's not going to be too hard. I feel like the Oni, if you hit him with a Boko club, could break the Oni in half or the blight in half immediately. The concern is, will the blight be able to dodge? And I think the blight could dodge, which gives him another C. I think that puts him strictly at the very top of C tier, just because, or maybe a C plus or B minus for endurance. I think that's good enough to say the blight is in a fairly decent middle of the pack scenario, where he could probably beat all these guys here in C tier, and everyone below him would probably struggle a little bit more with everybody else. Next up, we got the twins, Charlotte and Victor DeHaze, and these are French peasants, right? So what do they have going for them? Well, I guess we can sit there and we can admit that Charlotte is very physically strong. She's huge. She's able to deal with the fact that, her insides are getting kicked constantly. I think there's something to be said for that. Physical prowess. She's strong. She's not weak. She's got those strong peasant arms and that strong peasant body that's able to, eat bread and conserve carbs. I think that's good. I think that's, that's a very strong B plus tier quality in terms of physical prowess. In terms of strategic approach, I think she's right in the middle of C, just because it's really hard to determine what that is. Obviously, she fights with Victor. She knows how to run away, so she knows how to survive a fight. One of the things that a lot of these predator killers are able to do is attack prey, but not be able to survive a predator themselves. Charlotte is a survivor. She has avoided predators her entire life, right? Same with Victor. I think that gives her an idea to be a little bit smarter than most. I think that would be like a B minus for strategic, and also just being able to coordinate with another human being is huge for her. So being able to coordinate with Victor and kill things with Victor, that's huge. Supernatural abilities has none. That's an F, sadly, but she does have an it factor in the form of Victor, which we'll talk about in a second. Endurance-wise, she's getting kicked on her insides by her twin brother at all times. She's huge, and she's totally fine. You can't just bust her down. She's a tough peasant. I would give her a B plus in terms of endurance. So it's really dragging her grade towards B if it weren't for the fact that she had an F in supernatural abilities. But then her it factor, which only serves to give her points, if anything, is Victor. And I think Victor is very weak. Having an it factor in the first place is a good thing. But Victor being, I'm going to jump on something, or I'm going to gnaw on something a little bit, or I'm going to hold the locker doors closed, isn't really much of an if factor. It's really an F plus. But in terms of giving her points, I really put her at the top of C tier, and she will stay at the top of C tier for the rest of this ranking. Let's talk about Jiwoon, or the Trickster, our K-pop star. Where does our K-pop star, who is of average size, very, very skinny build, made to look pretty, not made to be tough. He's got his baseball bat and throwing knives. That's the Trickster's whole thing. So in terms of physical prowess, D+, he's not really physically fit. He's just this guy with a bat. In terms of strategic ability, he's a serial killer and evaded capture multiple times, and he's a professional gaslighter. We can give him a C+ for that. We'll give him a C, because that doesn't always translate well in a fight, really. In terms of supernatural abilities, he has none. That's an F. In terms of endurance, I don't think he's all that enduring whatsoever, and he gets headaches easily when he focuses for too long from throwing his knives. And then he does technically have an it factor with his throwing knives, but that's even worse than Charlotte's it factor, which was Victor, which is his throwing knives. And I think that's just a strict F, but that only gives him points. That does not bring down his average at all. That puts him in D tier for me. Nemesis from Resident Evil. Where do I put the Nemesis? Well, the Nemesis has a lot going for it in terms of physical prowess. I did say that the Oni was the most physically capable of all the killers in the series, but that's not totally true. In terms of raw strength, the Nemesis has him beat every single time. In terms of flexibility, that's where the Oni kind of edges out the Nemesis in total for physical prowess. But that still gives the Nemesis an S tier for physical prowess. Now, strategic approach. So long as he has an order of some kind, as we saw through the series, he is one of the most effective hunters of all time, and he's relentless, and he knows how to hunt. He doesn't need a strategic ability in order to succeed, which is kind of why I'd actually probably put Nemesis's strategic ability at like a B minus, because he's not really this super intelligent being. He's pretty intelligent, but he's not like spirit level of strategic or Oni level of strategic. In terms of supernatural abilities, I mean, he is a mutant monster that is quite supernatural. He has the tentacle. He's able to spread a virus, turn people into zombies, maybe? Question mark. I think that's a pretty good ability, is being able to utilize that tentacle at any given time. That tentacle has proven to be very effective. It's simple but deadly. Keep it simple. And I think that's an S minus for sure in terms of supernatural abilities, just because of how effective it is. And then in terms of endurance, he's S plus plus. He's on par with Pyramid Head. He's better than Michael Myers. He can go through what Michael Myers can go through, but worse, but even more, I should say. I think that puts Nemesis in S tier for sure. He's an S tier killer. He's a hunter. He's a monster. He will destroy things. Now, where do I put him? I actually put him ahead of Freddy Krueger, but do I put him ahead of the Spirit? Because I already said that the Pyramid Head is going to be my top. I actually do put him ahead of the Spirit, because I don't think the Spirit can actually kill the Nemesis. The Nemesis is kind of like this unstoppable, enduring biomutant machine. The Cenobite, Pinhead, the Hellraiser. Where do we put the Cenobite in our rankings? Well, let's talk about physical prowess. In terms of physical prowess, he's huge, but he's not physically fit. But when we talk about physical prowess, we've strictly talked about it in a fighting scenario kind of thing. I think what the Cenobite brings to the table that we haven't considered before is psychic ability. And the Cenobite's psychic ability is totally off the charts. Has been true in his movies, and it's true in the game as well. So where does that put our Hellraiser Pinhead friend? Because, this is the first killer that we actually have to consider something other than his actual, physicality. We have to consider this as his physical body. And for that, I put him in S tier all the way for that. In terms of strategic ability, from movies and from the game and from gameplay and from lore, S tier again. That is just super solid. In terms of supernatural abilities, need I even go on about the Chains of Torment? That's S tier. In terms of endurance, he's all about pain. That's S tier. But funnily, I don't think, he can... Now that we're like, okay, well, we saw his averages. We know where he is in a fight, in terms of tier. How does he do in head-to-heads? I do not think that the Cenobite beats the Spirit at any given time. I think the Spirit can beat the Cenobite, because the Cenobite can't hurt her. He can hurt the Nemesis even. He can mess with the Pyramid Head, but he can't beat the Spirit, and he can't beat the Nemesis. He can't beat Pyramid Head, but he can definitely beat Freddy Krueger. I think he can chain up and lock Freddy Krueger away for the rest of eternity, and that's good enough for me to put Cenobite in S tier. The Artist, whereas the Ghostface is one of my mains, the Artist is my other main. I love playing as the Artist. Where do I put the Artist? In terms of physical prowess, she's not physically strong whatsoever. And again, this is someone who's saying this is, someone who plays her constantly. She is missing her arms, which I understand have been replaced by this deadly ink thing. But, she is an artist by trade. She is not physically fit whatsoever. She's just really, really tall. Really, really, really tall. That's D tier for me so far. In terms of strategic ability, obviously in the game, you have to use your birds a lot, and I think in that scenario, it's B minus for sure against survivors. Against killers, it's more like a C tier type strategic ability. And she's kind of instinctual, kind of feral, as we saw through the most recent tome that's currently out, based off of all the stories we read, and the video particularly at the end, where she's just kind of turned into this feral creature, kind of like the hag, kind of like the blight. Supernatural abilities, she has it, but in a fight like this, it drags her down to a D plus, because the birds really aren't going to do anything. They're going to bother people. It might hurt certain killers for sure. Like, it will fuck up the hag. It will mess up the legion. It may even mess up all the C tier killers here, but it's not an extremely effective way of fighting, especially because it mainly relies on people running away from you. If people are attacking you, you shot the birds at them, but the birds will take a while to coalesce again to attack the killer again and actually hurt them. So for that, it's really D plus for the artist. In terms of endurance, I think she is D minus. She really is. I think she'll crumple in a fight. That's it. She's very skinny. She's only got her height going for her. She's somewhat okay in terms of strength. She has, pretty good strategic mind, but she's operating off of instinct. And I think that the trickster would beat her in a fight just by throwing knives at her face. Next up, the Onryo, or the Sadako, the ghost girl from the ring, or Ringu. Let's just get it out of the way. Physical prowess, we already set a precedent with the Cenobite, saying that psychic powers are to be considered, in which case the Onryo is S plus for that. Strategic capability, she's all strategy in terms of the game, like how are you going to attack, other survivors. I don't really think the strategy really gets factored in. So I actually will render her strategic ability a moot point. It doesn't matter, right? It all matters off of her supernatural ability, which is S triple plus. Like, her supernatural abilities are insane. A guaranteed kill on anyone given enough time. That's awesome. And then, in terms of endurance, the Sadako can't be killed. We saw Pyramid Head get killed. We've seen the Nemesis get killed. We've seen Freddy Krueger get beaten in battle. We've seen the Cenobite, lose a game of wits, I guess. The Spirit is probably the only one on par with her in terms of endurance. That's S double plus. That puts her near the top. And then it factor, she actually does have an it factor in terms of, the VHS tapes, which only stand to give her points. I think that's, B tier in a fight like this, because the expectation is that you're in a prolonged fight. But she's unkillable. She's unstoppable. She is extremely powerful. Does she beat Pyramid Head? Yeah, I do think she does actually beat Pyramid Head in a fight. I think that Pyramid Head can physically hurt her somehow, but even though the Onryo will have the most prolonged fight of just about all of these killers, because she kills people in the least direct way possible, she is on top. But if we had to go moment by moment, I would put Pyramid Head on top, and I think for the most part it's expected that this is all moment by moment fighting. The Dredge, the supernatural creature from the Garden of Joy, a paradise utopia cult, formed from the negative emotions of hundreds upon hundreds of people pent up over years and years and years. What is the Dredge? Okay, physically, extremely strong. It's this strong amalgamation monster of nightmares. Yeah, I'm going to give it an S tier for that. In terms of strategic approach, I think it operates off of people's fears. I really don't fully understand if it has any strategy. I'll give it an A+. In terms of supernatural abilities, it's an S tier for sure. In terms of endurance, I don't think you can kill the thing. It might be possible to chop the thing apart or burn it with light, but I don't think you can kill it, which puts it in the same league as the Spirit and the Onryo in terms of endurance. But I think that whole strategic ability thing, where it kind of falls apart, that's what puts it below the Spirit. I still think it's S tier. Wesker, the Mastermind. What is there to say about Albert Wesker, the Mastermind? In terms of physical prowess, extremely strong, extremely fast, superior anatomy in all ways, shape, and form. I would put him in A plus tier just because I do think he is weaker than the Oni. You know, even though anyone who plays Resident Evil will sit there and go, "No, he's even stronger than the Nemesis." I don't 100% agree. I think he has different kinds of strengths that more fall in line with the Bound than anything else. But either way, when we're talking about strategic approach, he's the mastermind for a reason. But I don't think he's smarter than Pyramid Head or the Onryo or the Cenobite or Freddy Krueger. So I'm going to give him an S minus for strategic ability. In terms of supernatural ability, I think the Bound definitely counts as a supernatural ability for sure. I'll say that's A minus because it's not necessarily super powerful. It's just kind of this thing that physically enhances him. It's strong, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's S tier by any means. So like A minus for that. And then endurance wise, I think, you know, he's very strong. He can live through a few bullets. But I do think he will crumple in the face of certain amounts of damage, as we saw through Resident Evil 5. So I would put Wesker in A tier. Do I put him ahead of Michael Myers? Yes, I do. He's faster than Michael Myers. He's smarter than Michael Myers. He is almost as endurable as Michael Myers, just not totally. And he's almost as strong as Michael Myers in any given situation. Next up, the Knight, which, you know, after, I think Wesker, for me, heralds what I call the modern generation of killers. And the Knight is the first non-licensed modern generation of killer. Because this was just a killer that, like Wesker, really didn't have... I mean, Wesker had a little bit, I guess, but Wesker, not really. Where they started making killers that weren't known for being scary, they were known for just being interesting, right? And obviously that changed later with the Unknown, and, you know, Xenomorph is scary, but Chucky isn't scary. The Singularity and the Skull Merchant aren't scary. Vecna, it's debatable. Very debatable. But let's talk about the Knight, who's not really the scary guy, but in terms of physical prowess, you know, we got to give it to him. He's very strong. He is very strong. So we'll give him... let's give him a B plus for strength, because he's not supernaturally strong, but he's strong, right? You know, we got to give that to him. B plus for strength. Strategic approach, I would give him an A minus. He has to command an entire troop. His coterie, his comrades and arms, you know, are something to, you know, behold. You know, the Carnifex, the Jailer, and the Assassin, that's a team of his. He has to coordinate them, and he obviously has to coordinate them well. I'll give him, you know, an A minus for a strategic approach. Actually, no, I'll give him a B plus. I think a strict B plus is fine. Supernatural abilities. His supernatural ability is summoning his allies. That's his big weakness. It's not really that great. I'd give it a D plus. In terms of endurance, he's wearing armor, so that's pretty strong, but it also slows him down a lot, you know, makes him sweaty, I'm sure. And I think that brings him, you know, that evens out the being protected and then the being, you know, gassed part. And then, you know, a chainsaw could likely find an opening in any of his plates and cut them apart. I'd give that a B minus. So where do I put the Knight overall? I actually put him in the bottom of B tier for sure. Next up, we got the Skull Merchant, the hottie from Brazil. What is there to say? I think her name's Amai. Either way, what's there to say about the Skull Merchant? In terms of physical prowess, she is D tier. Slightly stronger than the Plague, slightly stronger than the Trickster, slightly stronger than the Hag, but that's mainly because she is in better shape than the Plague, better shape than the Hag, arguably better shape than the Legion as well, better shape than the Artist. Yeah, so I'll give her that. She's got, you know, that in terms of physical prowess. Strategic ability, she's got a whole hunter mentality. She does not hunt predators. She hunts prey, strictly. She hunts rich people that screw her over or that she wants to screw over for whatever reason. She's never fought someone who's going to fight back in a significant way in her entire life. That is D+, at best. In terms of supernatural abilities, F. She doesn't have any. Endurance, D minus, maybe even F. Same level as Legion, Trickster, and the Artist. So where do I put her overall? I put her behind the Trickster, above the Artist. That's where I put her. That's where I have her at the moment. That's just kind of where I have to put her. You know what I mean? Yeah, she's not like, she's got this cool arm blade thing, but she is not this fantastic killer. She has drones. She's sitting there enjoying, a coffee while she watches her prey panic. When she's in a room of no prey whatsoever, she might even lose to the Legion on any given day. She's lucky that she's higher than the Artist right now. But that's just because she has a strong strategic approach. The Singularity. So, the Singularity kind of has everything, right? He's an everything guy, but, you know what they say, jack of all trades, master of none. Physical prowess, clearly very, very strong, because he's a robot, right? A. Strategic approach, extremely intelligent, but got outsmarted by a random engineer that barely understood what was going on. Maybe because Gabriel Soma has good survival instincts, but the Singularity doesn't scream strategically intelligent. He just has this grand plan. He's very naive. That's the thing. That's the problem with being a young life form. You are very naive. So I'll give him like a B+, right? Endurance or supernatural abilities, being able to fire out your silicone gel at things and use it as a camera. Okay, that's somewhat strong. I don't know how to fully explain how the Singularity works as a being in a supernatural sense, because it's meant to be sci-fi horror. It's not meant to be supernatural horror. I'd probably put it at a C+, maybe. No. Let's be nice. It's a B+ for sure. And then endurance. Endurance-wise, I would say being a robot has its advantages. He's very strong, can't tire out, can get hit and, won't crumple in response. Problems are very off-kilter. He has a very unbalanced pose and unbalanced natural gait that really drags him down to, a lower level. And then, yeah, I mean, you can knock the guy over, but he is still made out of metal, man. Like, he is hard to beat, but if you do beat him, he can't recover. So I'll give him a B+, and I'm putting the Singularity at the top of B tier. He is deadly. He is a deadly creature, for certain, without a doubt. Now, let's talk about the Xenomorph. Our first alien. Not our first supernatural being, not our first robot, but our first alien. And the thing is about the Xenomorph, one of the deadliest hunters known to existence, hunts the hunter, that sort of thing, doesn't care about guns blazing or flamethrowers, physical prowess, it's meant to be the perfect killer. That's an S tier for me. In terms of strategic ability, it's all about hunter mindset, and whereas we've talked about these instinctual killers multiple times, the Blight, the Hag, that sort of thing, the Demogorgon, he is smarter than the Demogorgon, but it doesn't propel him into S tier with his strategic approach. I think he's got an A tier level strategic approach to everything. But it's still really high. Supernatural abilities, that's the acidic blood, that's the extra things, the appendages, the sharp tail, all of that, all these other things. I think that is an A tier supernatural ability. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And then endurance, obviously we have to give the Xenomorph an S tier. You can cook the thing alive and it will, keep running at you. So with that, it kind of averages between A+ and S-, and then we go into head-to-heads. And I've got to give the edge to the S tier. just because I think the Xenomorph can kill anything in A tier without an issue. It can kill the Oni, it can kill the Huntress, it can kill Wesker, it can kill Michael Myers. It won't matter. But then where does it rank on S tier? Because we go straight into head-to-heads. Well, I think he takes out Freddy Krueger pretty easy. Freddy Krueger can't deal with the nightmares of an animal, essentially. The Dredge, might be able to fight it, but I'm not 100% sure. I think the Xenomorph would still be able to beat it, and if the Dredge had ways to reciprocate, the Xenomorph is agile enough and reflexive enough to be able to run away. The Cenobite might be able to deal with it because he's intelligent, sort of thing, like this really intelligent, being. But will that superior being be able to translate his understanding of pain and understanding of the human condition to an alien? I don't think he can. I think, honestly, the Xenomorph can beat just about anyone below the Onryo. Like, he can kill the Nemesis, no problem. He's faster than the Nemesis. He's faster than the Spirit, and we're not 100% sure about what the Spirit's end limit is. We only are kind of certain about the Onryo and the Pyramid Head, whereas the Spirit is still kind of like this thing where we don't know where you're at, actually. But I think the Xenomorph can kill Nemesis. I think it could give the Spirit a run for its money. Definitely could beat the Cenobite. Could probably beat the Dredge, and could definitely beat Freddy Krueger. All right, we're in the final stretch with this year's killers. I don't remember if the Xenomorph came out this year. To be honest with you, my memory's now a little hazy on that. But we're talking about the good guy, Chucky. Chucky is a doll from the Child's Play film series and also from the Chucky television series, which I've watched a lot of. Where would we put Chucky? In terms of physical prowess, he's a doll. That's D-. He's small, so we'll give him that. He's small and very stealthy. So actually, we'll put him at D+ for physical prowess because we've utilized stealth for Ghostface, for Amanda, for the Huntress, for the Xenomorph, for tons of these killers. We have to be fair. So he's a D+ in that regard. In terms of strategic approach, we've seen that Chucky can put together a master plan. I honestly do think, honest to God, that Chucky does have like a B-tier strategic approach. In terms of out-of-game lore and in-game lore, that sort of thing. Not in terms of gameplay. That's just not fair. But because it's almost too brain-dead simple to play as Chucky. You're relying on your being small. That's it. Supernatural abilities. F tier, really. Because, he's a doll. And I guess that gives him something, but it's not really a supernatural ability. In terms of endurance, he doesn't experience pain the same way we do, and he can survive a lot of pain in different ways than we can. So I'll give him, a B for that as well, for endurance and for physical prowess. But he can be crushed easily because he's a toy. You're a toy! But I would put Chucky at the top of D tier, for sure. He is D+ for certain. Could definitely kill the Plague, could definitely kill Ji-Woon, could kill the Skull Merchant, could kill the Ars, could kill all these guys over here. He's killed tons of teenagers before in the Chucky TV series. He can definitely take out the Legion. And, might be able to give Amanda Young a run for her money, but he is so low in terms of capabilities that he cannot be considered for head-to-heads with C-tier Amanda Young. Now we're talking about the Unknown. The Unknown is probably the scariest thing to come out of Dead by Daylight, to be honest with you. As a unique creation, obviously I've always thought the Sadako is like the scariest thing known to man, but that's because, that was like my first scary movie growing up and I was horrified as a kid. So where do we put the Unknown? The Unknown, we do know, is beatable, and we do know that the Unknown can be manhandled. Just through his lore alone, we saw the Unknown get manhandled by the entity. The Unknown, in terms of physical capability, his physical prowess, I would probably put him at an A-. Unlike some of these killers like the Singularity and the Death Slinger and the Hillbilly, where I've said, their physical disabilities, will put a hamper on their physical prowess. For the Unknown, it doesn't matter, right? They are this twisted thing, that defies all logic and reasoning. Just because their feet are backwards doesn't mean anything for the unknown. The unknown just doesn't care. It is strong, and it's strong and fast. That's what you need to know, right? Strategic approach, I would put maybe an A plus, because it reads to me as an instinctual creature, but obviously has a lot of thought put into it. If you think about the unknown, and if you try to research into the unknown kills you, kind of thing, and the unknown stalks you in the night and does it in a way where it's like the unknown will like leave out hints that it exists, but not enough for people to investigate it en masse, but just enough to keep getting more victims. I think the unknown's a very smart creature. In terms of supernatural abilities, I think S- is fair. It can teleport to its hallucinations. It can cause you to hallucinate. And then its UVX cannon is like this deadly slowing thing. I think that's fair enough. To say. And in terms of endurance, I think it's strong, but it's not as enduring as literally anything in the top row here. I think the common denominator with all the S tier killers is that they are extremely enduring. They can survive a lot of punishment. I don't think the unknown can do that. I think the unknown being manhandled by the entity was picture proof of that, which, puts me to believe that's in the middle of A tier with endurance. And does it have an it factor? Arguably, but, it's near the end of the video, and I'd like to drink water and eat food and cook. And I'm going to put the unknown in the middle of A tier. I do think that the unknown can beat Wesker and Michael Myers. I do think the unknown can beat the Huntress even, because he also has a range attack and he can lob it, whereas the Huntress will have a lot more difficulty based off of, line of sight and range with her hatchets. Definitely needs to be considered in that regard. But I do think, in a fight, the Oni could take the unknown anytime, any day. And that gets us to our final killer, Vecna the Lich. For those of you who play Dungeons and Dragons, you know a lot about Vecna, supposedly. Depends on if you actually care about Forgotten Realms lore. But Vecna is the extremely powerful Lich that, is like the greatest villain in the Forgotten Realms of Dungeons and Dragons. So what does that mean? Right? What does that mean? And I think for a lot of people that means Vecna is going to have huge supernatural capabilities. But let's talk about his physical prowess, because unlike the Sadako and the Cenobite, Vecna doesn't actually have all that much psychic prowess. He strictly relies on his spell casting. And in terms of that, we can argue that that should favor into his physical prowess, but I'm only going to use it in one regard, and that's his ability to fly. Otherwise, I'm going to put all of his other spell-like abilities in supernatural. In terms of physical prowess, that's where Vecna falls apart a lot. I'm going to put him in C+ for physical prowess, so very weak physically. Not strong at all. And, even if you talk to Vecna, if you were to take Vecna and he wasn't able to kill you, no matter how angry he got, if you were to say, I don't think that you are that physically capable, all things considered, unless you're using your spells, he would probably sit there, shrug, and say, yeah, you're probably right. But in terms of strategic capability, S tier for sure. This guy has survived eons, has only been successfully betrayed once during those eons, and, he's a mastermind. He's got all these spells for a reason. He has his Dispelling Orb, his Flight of the Damned, and his Mage Hand cantrip, all because it's all about maximizing the potential of the chase and messing with the survivor's ability to survive. The survivors are trying to survive. They're not going to do anything, though, because he's going to take every tool that they have and use it against them, or at best, at worst, and at best, he will sit there and say, well, the tools don't matter. I'm just going to ignore them. That's enough to put Vecna into S tier strategic capabilities, strategic approach, strategic ability. Supernatural abilities, also S tier. Those spells are powerful, and if we're going into full Dungeons and Dragons mode, he's got way more spells to consider. We're barely even scratching the surface. In terms of endurance, S tier. because he can't die. You know, people have tried to kill him over and over again. They have no idea where his phylactery is. They haven't been able to do it. S tier endurance. Not as strong as, you know, the literally unkillables, but almost unkillable is pretty strong. I do think that in a fight he would get bodied by the Oni, though, which is why he stays in A tier and he loses to the Oni, but he's near the top. And there you go. That's my tier list for who I think would win in a fight between all the killers in Dead by Daylight. We went so long that the sun started going down because it was a 2-hour long video. I hope you enjoyed my video. I hope you had a good time. I'm really hungry. If you liked this content, feel free to give it a like. If you didn't like this content, you know, if you want, give it a dislike. I mean, I would appreciate it if you didn't dislike it anyways. If you want to see more content, you can always subscribe. You can touch the bell icon for notifications for whenever I upload. But to be honest with you, I don't upload all that often. But, you know, if I were to become suddenly internet famous for some reason, maybe I'd upload more often. Who knows? But yeah, that's my video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed me talking about this totally fictitious scenario where the killers would fight each other. And I don't know why I did this. All right, have a great rest of your night. Bye-bye.